This session is just about the book and writing these slides. I wish I could say it was a launch, but this is a book unlaunched because the book was supposed to be finished and printed by now, but like the best things in life, you have to make sure that it's actually ready. So we're polishing up all of the chapters. We've got 14 solid chapters now, and we're in a really good place to kind of unleash it to the world. And because it's an open source book, you can all go and download it for free. So it's really not going to change much from where it is. So I think it's great to just disseminate this as a resource, especially if you do teaching, or especially if you're learning in one of the topics covered in the book. So it's part of a wider project, which I guess is our spatial, and we want to kind of stimulate this community to think about things, think about best practice, and encourage people to communicate between different packages rather than being very siloed. And I guess our approach of to make this a bigger project, we've also got this website, which is ridiculously zoomed in at the moment. So let's get that a bit more sensible. We haven't just done a book. We've written some questions and answers, which are in progress, and we've got various extended examples. And if you enjoyed the sea level rise example from today, you can click on here and look at it. We've got one on spatial point pattern analysis, which isn't very detailed because there's an entire book on this, but it just gives you an overview of this. And these are subjects that we think are better covered in other places, but we think it's worth saying something about this. So this is also a kind of meta package that gives you various packages when you install it. And essentially the point is that this book is part of a wider project. So what's actually in the box? Well, I think it's worth thinking about that. What is this book good for? What isn't it good for? It's not a book about various things, but we wanted to teach strong foundations. We wanted to teach specifically the SF package because all of us are using SF, and it's a really great package. And you can see these contents on the book's homepage, which is just here. So I think a great thing about building a HTML book, someone was asking about this, if you're interested in attribute operations, which may be linked to the tidyverse thing, you can just click on one of the chapters. And this is book down. This is based on open source software. So if anyone is interested in writing a book, you can use this stuff, and you can just zoom into the specific parts of the book that you're interested in. We did have some sections that had 4 subheadings, but we said this is getting too complicated. So I'm happy to say we've only got 3 subheadings in the book, but there's essentially a lot of detail in there. So I'm just going to say something about part 1. I think Jakub's going to say something about part 2, and then Yanis will say something about part 3, and we can just continue on until Roger's got some kind of questions and answers about it, if anyone has any questions. So I talked about the history, and I think it's important before you pick up a pen or sit down and program to think about why you're doing it and think about the history of the subject. And we tried to do justice to this. It's definitely not a comprehensive story because we're all quite inexperienced to the field relative to other people. We talk about the class system of SF and raster in a lot of detail in chapter 2. So we kind of put raster and vector in each chapter together. Then we talk about attribute data, which is just stuff like population of countries, temperature of raster cells, whatever it might be. And then in chapter 4, we talk about spatial data operations. And that's stuff like doing a spatial join or spatial subsetting for both raster and vector data. Then chapter 5 is geometry operations, which is kind of going down to another level and actually modifying the underlying geometry of simple features objects, and also talking a bit about, I think that covers map algebra in the raster section. Then we've got a small chapter on projections and transformations. So if you ever get confused about projections and how to do it either on raster or vector data, that's the chapter for you. And then finally, there's a relatively large chapter on reading and writing spatial data, and it gives a whole load of resources about where you can actually access data, including global data sets. So that's a little bit about part one. Jakub?
Thanks, Robin. So the second part is called, I think, advanced methods, and we mentioned making maps, base plots in I think second chapter, and in this part with called extensions, we are starting with making maps with R, and we have, for most of the examples, we are using tmap package. So that package was probably just mentioned only a few times here, but it's a great package to for making maps in R, and you can in a second see a lot of examples. It's just a few lines of very consistent code, and you can get your map nice and quick, and it's a great package. And starting from just a static map, static base map, we are just building on top of that, and we are going through adding some styles, changing colors, adding new layers. We are going through facet maps, we are going through animations, as you can see right now, and we're going to interact through interactive maps. So as you saw already on Monday and yesterday, we are using map view package, we're using leaflet package. Again, the data set you know already very well, so brewery data. And we, through using that interactive part, we are going even further, and we are using Shiny to create first simple app, and next little bit more complex interactive map in Shiny. So it gives you a foundation how to start building maps from like static maps through animations to the interactive maps. And at the end, we also show some non-classical maps and some other packages that you can use. Next, there is chapter 9, which is basically first part of Janet's talk today. So how to bridge R with Saga, with GrassGIS, with QGIS, and also how to use R with connection with PostGIS, which is probably also very, very nice, and you can also see some examples at the end of the chapter. And also, I think there's some exercises about that. Chapter 10 is a fairly new chapter. So if you are at that moment when you think, oh, maybe I need to write my own function to solve my problems, that's the chapter for you. So chapter 10 gives you an overview. What's a script, what's an algorithm, and what's a function, how to get from one to another, and what kind of problems you can solve. And Robin introduced there very, very simple algorithm that you can adapt and you can improve upon. And finally, chapter 11 is partially today's presentation about statistical learning and how to use MLR to build statistical model in space and how to properly validate them.
Yeah, and now you have the foundations and the extensions, and what is missing is how can we use it in the real world. Therefore, we have in part 3, which is showing some applications. And first is a use case of Robin, where he presents his research on transportation modeling. And second, I show something on geomarketing. And finally, the ecological use case you have seen today. And I think there are two things worth mentioning. The first is it's really great that you can use all these methods and tools in very different subjects. It doesn't matter if it's social sciences or physical, natural sciences, you can use them in all of them. And yeah, the second thing I would like to mention, it was important, I thought, maybe not. No, it's good to see how you can, now I know it. Why are we using R for this? we could use Python for that, or we could use Java or any other programming language. And I think especially these last chapters show the strengths of R, that is its data science power and its power with regard to various different approaches to modeling and to do ordinations and to do clustering. And I think this variety of statistical methods cannot be found in any other package. And this is also the reason why we are using R for this, and these use cases should show this. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So, as you can see, we don't have any final printed official versions, and we could have carried on writing more applications. So I really wanted to get a chapter in there on sea level rise, but that clearly wasn't going to happen. But in terms of the overall schedule that we gave the publishers, which is CRC Press, we're still relatively ahead of schedule. So we're aiming to get this all complete and sent to the printers by the 1st of October. And at the moment, where are we at? Well, we're basically at robustness testing, so trying to break code, and you'd be surprised how much code breaks even when stuff's on CRAN. Because at the beginning of the book, we were using the development version of many packages, and stuff was just breaking all the time. And we look to improve the exercises. So, as I said, teaching is a really important part of this. So at the end of every chapter, there's some exercises that try and test the user. And I think some of them are probably slightly too hard, some of them may be too easy. And then finally, we are looking to refine the explanation. So I'm sure there's some bits in there that just are not clear. The great thing about all of these things is there's still time to contribute. So we've had over 20 contributors, and this is our experience of when you just put everything on GitHub and allow the world to comment. People have kind of popped up from all over the place, including Yanis, who was one of the early people who started contributing to the books. I couldn't believe it. I said we've had about 50 issues raised, but when we looked at it, there's 150 issues have been opened and closed, which shows there's a lot of learning going on there somewhere. And you can see the list of contributors on the GitHub page. So going back to where we are, if you want to get involved in any GitHub project, it doesn't just apply to this. So any software that you're using, if you like the software or you like the project, you can help upstream. Just by asking a question is useful. It creates activity. Any issues that we have with the pros, which in software would be issues with the documentation, just say, this thing doesn't really make sense, and there's loads of bits that could be improved. And if you find any issues with the exercises, if you do any of the exercises after this conference, or I know some people were doing the exercises in chapter 3, if you spot anything that could be improved, please do let us know. And if there's any key contents missing, let us know, unless they're too difficult or they'll take a lot of time to include. So this all links back to the front cover competition in a way, because currently we have a hex sticker on the front of our book, which we hope when it's finally published by CRC Press, we can do better than that. So that's another way that you can contribute if people are interested in spatial data visualization. So I think, and that's just a very rough time series plot of how we've been going up and down over time. And I think it's fair to say we kind of have peaks in autumn by the looks of it, and in spring, and slightly less activity in summer, but maybe not. I think that dip just before July was when I was ill. So we've been working really hard on this, and it's great to get it to the stage where it's basically complete. But this brings me on to my final slides, where we are building on what other people have done, and the fact that it's open source has allowed us to build on the shoulders of the greats. So this photo that was just sent to me about 20 minutes ago by Roger just shows, I believe it's almost exactly 10 years ago, 2008, ASDAR was published. If ASDAR doesn't mean much to you, for many people it was the Bible of R for spatial. So many PhD students have it on their shelf and we're referring to it. And I actually have a signed copy, signed by Roger, the first time that I met Roger, which is quite funny. So thanks to everyone involved in that project, which we're really would it would be impossible to do without that book project. The entire R and R spatial community and everyone who's contributed to the book so far, and also to this community, the Geostat or OpenGeoHub community, for the opportunity. So there we go. This is 10 years previously, 10 years into the future, we have this. But we're going in the right direction. So thanks a lot, and I'm going to pass it over to Roger, who's going to chair a few question and answer, I think. So thanks.
Okay, so I hope that with some exceptions, your health has held through this rush to get things done. Writing books is quite demanding, and anybody who's done it will know that it has lots of surprises, but it's generally fairly rewarding, that you certainly learn a lot more about how to write stuff. In terms of being communicative. You think you know how to write things like articles, and then suddenly it turns out that writing an article and writing a book is not quite the same kind of thing. Are there any questions directly to the authors about the book? Can anybody see that their favourite topic isn't there, and that you've volunteered to join in Rush in the last weeks? No volunteers?
That's a good question.
The question was, is there an overlap between 10 years ago and now?
I think we tried to minimize the overlap. So point pattern analysis is a prominent part of it, and using area data for epidemiology is a big part of it. And we kind of avoided that specifically because we think that it was done so well that actually the contents of that are still relevant. So I'm trying to think I think in terms of describing the class system, is the same, but obviously the packages have moved forward. So ASDAR starts off by talking about the SP class system, and we start off with SF. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, I would guess that probably some concepts are similar, like projections and concept of vector and rasters, but we definitely try not to overlap as much as we can. So we move to TMAP for most of the visualizations. We move to SF as a main base for vector. As Robin mentioned, our examples and applications are totally different from that book.
Other questions? As I had one, my desktop still runs the checks on both versions of ASDAR. You're looking forward to doing that?
So maintenance, yeah. I think software in its very nature evolves, and that's even more true of open source software. So it's likely that in 1 year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, there's going to be breaking changes. And I think this is where experienced programmers really come into play. So EDSA is very resistant to adding new features to SF, for example. So I'm confident that the foundations that we're building on are future-proof, and we've deliberately tried to choose packages that are future-proof. In terms of the process of doing this, I think you were very innovative with ASDAR in terms of running writing bash scripts, I believe, that ran the entire code every day just to check it works on the latest version. Building that from scratch is an amazing achievement. So now we've got it relatively easy. There's a function called use Travis that just sets up a Travis automated continuous integration. So in a way, as long as Travis doesn't go bust or there's not an alternative, we're always going to be testing it. And in fact, that's been one of the things that's pushed us to keep it up to date. So basically, when you get that red, I'll show it on the book actually. So this is the book, and we have it quite prominently so that if we give up in 5 years' time or we find other things more interesting, this thing's going to go red, and that's really going to annoy me and Jakub and probably Yanis. So we're going to try and keep that button green. So basically, it's got a lot easier to do that over time. I don't know if anyone else wants to.
And it will send an overriding notification which will wake you up at any time of day or night.
Yeah, you can get it to send emails. I don't know about alarm clocks going off.
Yeah, in the process of writing this book, we tried to also influence some of the packages, and we also influenced some of the changes in the packages. From me personally, I influenced some stuff in TMAP package. But because of that, we also broke our book many times because we impact that package, and that package impact our book. But that was a great process because in this breaking stuff, we also are fixing stuff, and we are improving and making that hopefully better.
Okay, so I guess it remains simply to wish you luck with the completion of the book, and may it flourish. Should one wish authors unauthorized translations? As we were translated into Chinese before they asked. They did ask, but this happened, so it's fun.
So I can say one thing about this. So a friend of Jakub sent me a photo of a book, Efficient R Programming, that had been translated into Polish, but he said the translation was terrible. So from a quality perspective, probably community-driven translations is preferable, but I actually don't, it's a grey area with CRC Press. So one thing that we haven't mentioned actually is the license. So we've got a Creative Commons no derivatives license on it, which means it's free to use and distribute for teaching, but you cannot create derivatives of it. You can contribute to it and improve it. And I don't know where translation fits into that box legally. We've just got on with writing it and hoping that good stuff comes of it. But yeah, well, okay, so probably it will have to be CRC Press. That's the view from our legal expert here. So, yeah, okay. Okay,
so hand over to Tom.
I have a question about these interactive maps. I mean, what is today like a lecture material? I mean, is it a website or is it a PDF? I mean, how does these interactive maps, how do they look in some static medium? You know, you lose the magic, right? If you just generate a PDF, it's just a PNG then, right?
Yeah, that's definitely right. But so in the PDF version, you've got only a screenshot of the application. But in the same time, web page is always online. So every time you came across the thing you want to try, go online and check it, because you will be also creating interactive maps and interactive application for online purposes, not for published purposes. So yeah, that's the limitation. But in the same time, it's a nice feature of Bookdown, that you can in the same time create a book which is HTML, and with slight corrections, you've got a PDF. Of course, there's this limitation also limit how the PDF can be styled and how the HTML functions can be used. But in the same time, you've got a lot of compatibility, and you can just create one book for those two formats.
There's the final bit, which will come sometime in November, which is that when it's been copy edited, we had difficulty putting the copy editing back into our original SWeave texts. So this was a problem because they'd changed things, and things were on different pages from the ones that we wanted them on, and there wasn't a great deal we could do at that stage because it was printed. But it's sort of heads up that will hit you.
I had my book with Elsevier, and then we wrote it in Tech, and we sent them, and then I noticed that they sent it to India, and the people were the actual people that do work in Elsevier, and then they retype it in something, yeah. And then they send you back, and I said, well, I can fix this, but I have to send you back the tech code. They said, no more tech code. This is over. You can just send us the corrections. Yeah. So the CSR Press are more flexible?
Yeah, I think you get better and worse publishers. So I had one publisher that actually broke quite a lot of code because they didn't realize that code has to be intact, so they just put lines of code onto different things and broke it up. CRC Press has got the R series, so they're actually quite experienced now. O'Reilly is also an excellent publisher, and who knows, like there's likely to be open source publishers up and coming who understand this stuff. So I think also that's got easier over time.
So I would like to really congratulate you. It's really inspirational. I was reading through. It's really fantastic content. I have some comments, and I will extend some things. But it's really inspiring, and I use it now. I went to 2 conferences. I said that's what we should be doing. Instead of just writing books, we should be writing the whole packages with the code and everything, and sharing it with people. And I know in my society in Pedometrics, they wrote a book together with a group of people. Pedometrics is also lots of statistics and statistical modeling. So you will say lots of people do things in R. But they publish it with, it's a closed book, and I think it's actually almost 180 euros for copy. And so it becomes for me like a closed culture. I mean, okay if it was maybe 30, 40 euros, but when it's 180 euros, I don't want to spend so much money on that. So, you are really inspirational. I want to congratulate you and keep on moving. It's fantastic.